We are. Here we are. This is Here Now with Steve Struggle. And this is Dr. Abraham. So we've got a war in our hands now. And it's a
Sure
war
do.
that is basically the war of the third world against the first world. World war, in effect. And Iran is in no hurry to end it either. The United States, I hear, asked Italy to intervene to try to get a ceasefire, but doesn't seem like Iran is interested. It's not something that Iran, is going to settle for, like it did last time. I mean, it was trying to be civilized last time, right? So it was, like, okay, so we've punched each other out. Now let's get down to negotiate and get to some sort of a settlement so it doesn't happen again. But no, the United States and Israel wants it to happen again. I saw this video of the Marine who took on a congressional hearing to denounce the
Yep.
war. And
Yep.
this guy was taken out, but not quickly. Four guys, four security guys on him,
Yeah.
plus a congressman, and he was holding on to the handle of a door, and they opened up the door and and push him against the door so that his hand and arm are behind the door, and so either his hand or his arm broke while
Right.
they were taking him out. But he was still sort of mouthing off there. He wouldn't let them go, that easily. And but I think that he was making a mistake, as a lot of people on the, seem to be saying that this is, a war that Israel dragged the United States into doing. And Hexith or Rubio, who knows what the difference is between the two. Anyway, they were claiming that because they knew that Israel was going into this attack posture against Iran, and they knew that Iran was going to retaliate against U.S. bases in the Gulf. Therefore, they were obliged to intervene preemptorily because they knew that they would be attacked. And so, in order to preempt attack, they would attack. So, justifying attack, because they're opposing an attack, I mean, it's sort of circular in logic, isn't it? Like, where do they think they can get away with logic like that? It's incredible. And, like,
Well, they get away with logic like that when there are no professional fighters of logic and truth to debate them in the U.S. political scene.
hmm,
Because back in the day, somebody would have said something about that and it would have got coverage in the press. There's nobody now. I mean, maybe there are people who are going to step up, but they make those kind of lies. They figured nobody's going to vote. Is no one is going to politically challenge them against their lies. That's how why they make the statements.
yeah,
That that's my opinion.
yeah, they think they can get away with it too.
Right.
Yeah. But we're here. And we're free to say that this is uh, what I think and what I've seen them say for themselves in terms of the commanders who are giving speeches to the soldiers, telling them that they're involved in some sort of a war of Armageddon, something like that. The Christians, evangelicals have this word, for a final war, a war to end all wars. That's what they said in the First World War, wasn't it? I think. Yeah. And so they're willing to wage this, world war in order to reoccupy the Orient, because they think the Orient belongs to them, not, in fraternal embrace, but as a resource base, which is what they are, like already. Now, Iran is trying to escape from that. Iran is the one who nationalized the oil, right? That's what resulted in the overthrow of the coup d'etat against Mogadishu. I think his name is not entirely pronounced correctly, though. And so Iran has been fighting ever since. I heard it said today, I didn't realize it was so severe, but Iran lost 1 million people in the war that they were confronted with, from Iraq, from Saddam Hussein. so-called axis of resistance. Really, what kind of an axis is that? And they used chemical warfare supplied by Britain to Iraq to be used on Iran. And so then they tried to accuse Iraq subsequently of having weapons of mass destruction because they one time did have those weapons that were used against Iran. Okay, so supposedly they were supposed to have the same weapons there, even though they were used up, and they didn't. And now, the big, lie is that, Iran is close to developing a nuclear weapon. Well, both Khomeini and Khomeini, supported if this fatwa that declared the name of, the Shia religion and, their authority as essentially, like the Pope of the Shias, who are about 20% of the international Islamic population. Well, they declared that they didn't want to have a nuclear weapon because it was immoral. It was against any sort of sense of humanity, any sense of civilization, to want to obliterate civilization. So it's a contradiction in and of itself. So they opposed it. But then, like they've come along now, they've assassinated, Khomeini initially, and now Khomeini was also assassinated. So those fatwas were issued in their names. Well, if they're not around anymore, then their fatwa is not around anymore either. Like that sort of, principle is now put into question by members of the Iranian military itself, Iranian political tendencies as well will want to have a deterrent that is more powerful than what they've had up to now. And what they've have, at this point, is evidently not enough of a deterrent. And so they argue that, Iran should have a nuclear bomb like Israel does, and then they can deter Israel and the United States from doing to Iran what they're doing now. Well, it's sort of self-defeating because if they're willing to use a nuclear bomb, then they are legitimatizing the use of a nuclear bomb by the Zionist state. So it's a bit of a contradiction. Now, the way they resolve that is that they allowed, the uranium to be enriched up to 60% for those, who wanted to move towards a nuclear bomb and also as a negotiating tactic, which was only used, for propaganda purposes, and negotiations never went anywhere anyhow. So, nonetheless, they had the 60%. Now, that is something of a deterrent in and of itself, though it's not a nuclear bomb at 93% uranium-235 enrichment. Nonetheless, 60%, if the nuclear bomb was used by Israel on Iran, then it would be possible, even though they don't have a nuclear bomb to reply with, nonetheless, it would be possible with their advanced missiles to penetrate the defense shields and arrive at Tel Aviv, with a ballistic missile that is filled with 60% uranium. And it doesn't even have to explode, it just has to scatter. And the whole city is radioactive and it would have to be abandoned. That would be the end of Tel Aviv. Unfortunately, it would probably also be the end of Jaffa and Haifa. And Jaffa is a Palestinian city or town, right next door. So it's, like all terrible, but nonetheless, that could be done, by the Iranian military if they were subjected to a nuclear bomb attack from Israel. So there's a bit of a deterrent there, that's not mentioned anymore, because a lot of, leftists, want to defend by Iran by saying nice things about Iran. Well, it's not so nice to say, that they could use, this 60% uranium and a dirty bomb, but nonetheless, that's what, war is all about. And if Iran were forced to use it, then they could possibly do so. And this would be a disaster for the entire region. It would be like, Chernobyl in the middle of a city, only worse. So that's something I wanted to point out that nobody else is pointing out. And but it seems like even though Iran has taken a pounding here, and Iran doesn't have an air force, and doesn't really have a navy, and doesn't have very much of a anti-missile program to defend itself against incoming missiles. I think it all had, was the Russian S-300As, which are outmoded and are not working evidently. So, but what Iran has been able to achieve nonetheless is they've obliterated the U.S. military presence around the Gulf. All the U.S. military bases have been hit in spite of their hosts' uh, verbal protection. So, that's quite a remarkable achievement in and of itself.
It-
This,
It's 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 more than remarkable. It's stunning. It's
yeah,
stellar.
yeah,
It's strategic. It's strategic because it's causing conflict between those states and the United States.
yeah.
Initially, they wanted, remember the press conference excuse me, the press release that the Syrian government released last week that I mentioned, and
Oh,
they
yeah,
were upset with Iran for bringing the war to our Arab neighbors
yeah,
because Syria is sucking up to Saudi Arabia and Oman and the rest of them. But
yeah,
now those countries they're considering back backpedaling their investment plans for the United States and the West because they're losing money because people are not coming there for tourism and this,
mm,
that, and the other, and they just can't see how they can make it if they put these investments in place and their home front is weak and they may have to. They're talking about forming their own army, their kind of continental army between those countries, get the U.S. base out of there.
yeah,
They're talking about it, and they sound like they're serious about it because they can't. Even though the attack is on the base is on their country's territory,
yeah,
and they don't want the bombing on their territory. They don't want the bombing on their territory, and the base is gone. Then Iran doesn't have a basis for attacking them because they're not at war with Iran. The United States is at war with Iran. So I
yeah,
found that very interesting. That they want to these Gulf states are considering ending some of their investments that they plan for this year and next year because of the losses they're taking because of the war itself. Again, oil prices, damage to the economy, damage to structures in their country, and also what I read and heard was that Kuwait, I think Saudi Arabia was really pissed because they knew that the air defense system that they had in Saudi Arabia was sent to Israel. Yeah,
yeah. It's
yeah,
on U.S. military base. That's sovereign U.S. territory there, When Iran says that it's going to retaliate against the U.S. military bases, they're not retaliating against the countries in which they're situated. No, they're attacking, U.S. sovereign territory, military territory that has declared war on them. And yet they complain when
sure.
like what do they expect? Like declaring war, and they expect that nobody's going to do anything back to them. Like they're so naive and so arrogant, and arrogant
Yes,
naivete. Like it's
they're
almost
very arrogant.
stupid, really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
almost. Yeah, borderline. Yeah, to not expect, and they told you it was going to be a regional war. They
Yeah.
told you. They told you what they were going to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So they've also been able to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. At first, they just did it verbally, and they just warned everybody, not to come by. So somebody sent, four ships down, and they were all hit, and they turned back. So that's that. The strait is closed. And then some of the countries have had their oil refineries hit as well by Iran because they are so gung-ho for the U.S. military. So they've gotten their reward, and oil production is down, 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 down. Now, China needs the oil there. China gets 20% of its operating oil, from that source. So it would be very interesting if the Chinese naval forces came in there to escort a Chinese oil tanker through the strait with the
so
agreement of
I
Iran.
think something like that. I think China has made a request for that. I read somewhere China's made some kind of request that Iran do something about the Strait of Hormuz, maybe
Yeah.
just for Chinese destiny destined boats or something. Some kind of request has been made of
Yeah.
of openly regarding passing through. So you may
Yeah.
have a point there. It's something's going on. What I'm not sure,
Yeah.
but something's going on. Yeah,
Yeah, well, China's sort of in a bit of a strait there, in the Strait of Hormuz, because, 20% of their oil comes from there. And if they were to resort to using coal again, I mean, they're already responsible for 30% of the US, of the world's coal emissions,
pollution. Yeah, yeah.
pollution, that's China with coal, 30%
Right.
of the world, carbon, from coal burning, comes from China. But Japan as well is gets 80% of its oil from that strait. Woohoo. Japan would have to shut down in a little while. It lasts another week or two or so. And that's exactly what Iran wants to do. So it's going to get tense, very tense. And then the Dow Stock Exchange has taken two dips already. And the famous 50,000, mark announced by Bondi at that hearing, that she was so proud about. First, it dropped to 40, 49 and a half, then 49 and 48 and a half. It's only going in one direction. So, there could be very well a economic crisis coming along. So, while the United States of America is seeking regime change in Iran and asking the people to rise up in revolt against your oppressors, the people, they're not going to do that because they're pissed off at the United States. First of all, because they killed 165 girls, schoolgirls, you know, you know, that's, right away that put a sour taste in people's mouths, whether they were from the opposition or not. And I've seen the opposition woman, in the video, declaring that uh, while they, want to seek a degree of liberty that is not afforded them, nonetheless, they're not going to let the United States get away with this. And Trump, he wants to be, like choose the next president of Iran. In effect, he wants to be the president of Iran. Good luck.
No, no, sis. Yeah, all this nonsense about what he's going to do, and he needs to just shut up. This is not Venezuela.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is not Venezuela. Okay.
Yeah.
So the only way he could do that if everybody in Iran is dead,
Yeah.
if he kills everybody, and there's nobody living and nobody is occupying the entire country,
Mm.
then he might be able to say who's going to be the president. But this idea that he can even think he can do this,
Mm.
see, that's a problem for me. That you think you can even do it?
Mm.
No, 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 no. You can't. No, that's not how do you even think such something stupid like that? I'm going to name the president. It makes me think that he's actually really insane. Yeah, he must be. No, I think he's just out of his freaking mind because
Yeah.
that's some nonsense right there, man. That's
Yeah.
absolute nonsense.
Mm.
Now, you're going to pick the president of a country. The only way you do that is if you run the country. And trust me, short of a massive nuclear attack on that country, even if you want to win it, it's not going to be soon. It's not going to be easy.
Yeah. And if they want to
That's
put boots on the ground, the foreign minister said, "We're waiting for you."
he sure did say it, didn't he?
Yeah.
He sure did say it with no hesitation,
Yeah.
with no fear.
Yeah.
I mean, just with no fear, man. Just
This is
just
just incredible. What they're feeding the American military. This, talk of Armageddon and how, they're, uh, it's like this crusade mentality. Like, shouldn't that have, you know, disappeared a long time ago?
no, man, no, man. That's why Rubio made that statement about we need to go back to the days of the Enlightenment and we were conquering the world. This is what they want to do. See,
Yeah.
one thing they have said, one thing they have done, which I have noticed, is they're telling you what they're going to do, and then they do it.
Yeah.
They said we have a new doctrine about Western Hemisphere, and they first thing they did was hit Cuba with starvation and hit Iran, hit Venezuela. Excuse me. They
Yeah.
talked about they are duplicitous. The negotiations means nothing for them. Negotiation is just a ploy. Just a
Yeah.
ploy to soften you up and wait. We need a little more time. So let's negotiate. Okay, they get the signal tonight. Okay, we're ready. The negotiations just stop and they bomb you tomorrow.
Yeah.
So they've shown what they're about, and in fact, they're talking about naming the president of Iran means they actually think they can do it.
Mm.
They
Yeah.
actually think they can do it.
Yeah.
And if you look at, but the problem is, if you look at history, the Shah was a product of a U.S. intervention, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So to say we want to reimpose, we want to put somebody in, is going back to the days of that Shah type government.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
This guy,
And
he thinks he's a czar or something,
well, the
Oh,
man's sick in the head, man. He's
But
sick
just
in the
like the
head.
czar, was totally discredited, when they lost the war against Japan. And that led to a psychological revolution amongst the people, including the peasants, whose, children were the ones who were fighting in the war. Then they realized, the Shah was not infallible. He was not, placed there by God. And, when Trump is going to lose this war, then, even his supporters are going to realize that he's not a messenger of Jesus Christ and he's not getting away with it. There's just bombast. And this crusade is no more. Then people are going to turn against him. And then this could be the, parallel sort of, to the Tsarist, regime and how they were discredited and overthrown as a result of losing a war. And plus, they were losing the war against the Prussian Germans, on the west side there, soon after. So that would be, like a factor that would trigger a revolutionary change when the administration is so discredited that they have to be, wiped away off the board completely. That could happen,
True.
depending
That could
on,
happen.
yeah.
That could
Losing the
happen.
war, like their whole rationale is that, power is right. You know, so if they don't win, that means they're wrong by definition, by their own definition. So, when the people they've convinced that might is right, see that they don't have the might, then they realize, that they've been backing the wrong one and that they had better change, horses because the one they're on, is going in the wrong direction. So, yeah, that could happen. Depending, how badly the United States loses this. They've already lost all those military bases, uh, but they still have the Navy there, So I'm wondering what's going to happen. The fight is going to turn around the Strait of Hormuz. If the U.S. Navy tries to get in there, are they going to take out the U.S. Navy? It's possible. They have the missiles to do so. They don't have a Navy to do so. And they have 20 small submarines that are sort of, hiding away there inside the Strait of Hormuz, waiting for any ship to come by. But so far, I don't think they've used them. I think they've just, used some C-2 ship missiles to take out the 3 or 4 ships that tried to make it through earlier on today and turned
Okay.
around. So there's no oil going through, nothing. So the whole world is teetering on the edge of a major crisis. The price of the barrel has gone up already, not only to 80, but to 92, $93. And that was a few hours ago. So it's probably more than $100 a barrel right now. And then they say it could go up to 150. So, which is good news for Russia because they can sell their oil at a premium. But, it doesn't do so much for the United States, who only gets 7% of its oil intake, from the Strait of Hormuz. This isn't about a U.S. oil source. This is about U.S. oil control over all of the oil in the world. because in that way they can control every other economy, what with their sanctions and all that. So this is a war of economic dominance, hegemony, not of necessity. It's a war of choice, as they say.
Interesting. Interesting analysis. Wow. I'm really happy we're talking about this because it's not being talked about in this way in this country, even by the activists. They're more talking about, okay, like let's look at Brian Baletic. Okay, this is my critique of what's happening. Here's what could change the war, the balance of the war. If the U.S. does this and Iran does this, and the U.S. doesn't do this and Iran doesn't do this, he talks about how the war could be shifted. That's fine. That's it. That's his analysis. You have analysis of people like Vanessa Beeley, who talks about the role of Israel in attacking Lebanon and Iran at the same time, which is quite important actually, and how that politically is shaping the region and the role of Syria in all of this. Syria kind of an important player that isn't saying much, but it's an important part of the region. Then you have the situation with Turkey. Turkey, kind of off to the side, and its hatred for the Kurds and the Kurds being manipulated by the United States, supposedly to enter through
Yeah, supposedly that's the word.
Turkmenistan.
Yeah, I've heard it disputed. Yeah, there
Yeah,
is no
right,
secret.
right.
And
So there is some debate about this. If this actually is happening or going to happen,
yeah,
but the analysis we're giving is based on the political situation and the geopolitical situation. Not really. It's close to Beeley, but not exactly. But I think she's one of the closest people looking at it, and at least trying to have that kind of analysis. People like um, Alexander Mercouris. He has the diplomatic approach to analyzing it, but he was really taken aback by, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday. It was a bombardment of Iran by the United States that was just unthinkable. The amount of buildings they destroyed, historical buildings that were destroyed or damaged. There was
yeah,
even a pro-Shah monarchist who wrote the Financial Times of London, and said that he was concerned about the level of brutality. That he was just shocked at how brutal the war is being carried out, and that's a person's probably going to go. If that person doesn't go back, doesn't begin to support the government, they're definitely not going to support the United States bombing. So the
yeah,
bombing is having some impact on even those who are opposed to the Islamic government because of
yeah,
the brutality. The brutality, you know.
yeah,
Um, and so I think we're doing a good thing here, trying to bring some political clarity to the political and economic realities that this war is impacting. And I think you're right about those bases. Um, they're being attacked militarily and politically. The countries that host them are having to think twice about this.
yeah,
You have to. Come on. You have to. Especially if the missile defense system are being given to Israel. That shows the United States favors. They don't favor you, do they? No,
mm, mm.
no, they don't. If they did, they have some missile defense here for you, but they don't. So, I mean, that's all I'm saying.
One-
Um,
It's interesting. One of the first hits made by an Iranian missile was on a Zionist colony in the West Bank, just east of Jerusalem, Meir Sharim, and that's an interesting sort of first step, because it's like an act in support of Palestine in the recognition of the Palestine state because
they
they
have.
targeted those colonists. That's a very important sort of factor. It sort of has changed the whole relationship of forces in the West Bank right now. Very interesting. But this is uh, this is a crusade, and crusaders don't like to stop until they've won. Now they're trying to claim that they've won, so they can stop. Well, they're not going to get their wish. This war is continuing on. Now, considering it can be calculated even, because, if one takes the number of missiles available and stocked up by Iran that are, underground, of course, they cannot be touched. Now they're talking about uh, giving Israel thousand pound bombs, a ton of TNT to drop, on these bunkers, underground, munitions factories and missile factories. Whole factories underground there, that cannot be touched. The only thing they took down in their first volley of bombings, were just facsimiles of launching equipment, made out of wooden sticks and paper. So that's what they took out. That's what they claim, when they took out all the launchers, as if, Iran was going to leave the launchers out there in the open to be bombed. Oh, yeah. Well, no, they've got mobile launchers on trucks that can move anywhere, anytime, and can never be targeted because they're not going to be where they were before the missile was fired. So, like it's that at least is invulnerable. Oh my.
And that is good. That's good.
Yeah. I have some photos to show you. I have some questions about these photos.
Please.
Let me see if I can get to that. I just did something wrong. Okay, here we go. Now, where's the share? Ah, here it is. Um, um, Let me see if I can find it here. I don't know how to work this. Wow, I don't even know how to get out of there. Oh, okay, I'm not even in share yet because I can't find it. Okay, let's see if I can do something to find it here. Oh yeah, here it is. Oh yeah, there. Now come back here to you. And now I can share and show you. Yeah, here it is. Now, these are some pictures I've copied of demonstrations, and like this one here, it's opening up now. Okay, so stop the war in Iran. Trump is a war criminal. Okay. Now this is Answer Coalition. What is that? Answer Coalition.
Answer
Is
Coalition. Answer Coalition is the United Front of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. That's an organization they control, and that's who they go to as in the public eye. They're known as Answer. Some know them as PSL, but their front group is Answer.
Oh yeah, I have another one here which has their name on the protest. Here it is. So it's not a real united front if it's dominated by one tendency.
Well, yeah, no, it's a front of their organization.
Ah, well, that's not how you build a movement. So they don't know what they're
This is what,
doing. They're trying
well,
to build a.
this is what people have been saying for a while. However, when they call demonstrations, people show up because they're nationwide.
So
See,
they're
it's
well
one of the
organized.
state. They're well organized. They have a lot. They have enough people to have demonstrations in 10 or 12 U.S. cities, which is to me significant.
Yeah.
And people show up.
Uh-huh. But they're limited to party building. That's their strategy.
That's their strategy, right? Through
So
building
that's
answer, they build their party.
okay.
Right.
I know that
That's what they
phenomenon because that's what, I was in the Trotskyist party in the 60s and 70s, and the Canadian section of the Fourth International operated on that basis, in which, they would go into a movement, build it, but then they would recruit, the leadership, the best activists of that movement, and pull them into the party, and then start feeding them, one meeting after another, so they didn't have any time left, to build a movement. And so they would, suck the essence out of the movements into the party, and the party itself, would just end up, in bickering, with internal disputes. That's what happened, with the League for Socialist Action in Canada. They were
Well,
into the abortion movement, into the women's movement, into the anti-war Vietnam anti-war movement for sure, uh, uh, and all those movements, they just left behind after they took a few people away from it that they used for their party building, which didn't get built evidently because they fell apart because they drained the movements, and if the movements don't continue, then any sort of political movement is not going to continue either, because the lifeblood of any political movement comes from the any political party comes from the movement, from the social movements, from the spontaneous social movements of people who realize what's necessary to do and to say. But the parties are usually late in coming because they don't recognize revolutionary social movements as they should, because they consider that they are the one and only revolutionary movement. That it's also limited, very limited. I'm very disappointed in the Western left, and I want to leave and get down to the revolution where it's happening. But
what you do is just you build something, you build a real deal,
yeah, yeah,
build a
that's
real deal.
here.
That's what you do.
Yeah, we're
And
doing
that's
that.
and that's what this program is about.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Okay, good.
um,
So we'll broadcast again, as soon as it's necessary. If, major
right,
events happen, then we'll come
right.
back to everybody, to connect it all together,
Yes, exactly. 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 I think that's a good idea. I think that's what we should do. That's why I wanted to get this on tonight and get started because the weekend may be full of everything we don't know. So
Yeah,
we'll see we'll see what will unveil, and we'll
yeah,
come back and talk to people then.
yeah. Very good. Okay. Let's see now. This is the end, my friends. The war decides one way or the other. As Rosa Luxemburg said, socialism or barbarism.
How about yeah? That's kind of the choices. That's right. Thank you, Abraham. Thank you.